Well, it's been a while. We've got a lot to catch up on Hockey North. Montreal's season came to an end after what had to be the closest sweep ever. Another Toronto hockey team exits in the first round of the playoffs after a collapse against Minnesota, and Boston goes up 1-0 over Minnesota in the finals, and they're perfect in the playoffs. What's up, everybody? Rob Pizzo, Saroya Tinker back with you, and do we have a lot to talk about. We've been busy, so let's get right into it. Of course, we're going to get to the finals, but all three Canadian teams, watching hockey right now. So I kind of want to go through, the two eliminations we've seen. We're going to start with Toronto, Minnesota, a series I was very close to doing ringside reporting. Toronto stranglehold on the series. They're up 2-0, and somehow let it slip away. So I'm going to ask you a really intellectual, intelligent question here. What the heck happened?
I mean, I want to say our predictions were absolutely just completely wrong.
Right? Yeah, you're not supposed to bring up predictions when they're wrong. They never happen when they're wrong.
We were just completely opposite,
Yeah.
But I mean, Spooner, that loss for Toronto in those games, it's imperative that they have her clearly MVP candidate for this season. And I mean, they definitely suffered with the loss of Spooner, and their players just didn't step up. We needed to see Sarah Nurse get in there, Blair Turnbull. We need to see Malte put pucks in the net. And I mean, Spooner's been the one doing that for them this year, and they had that loss.
Is there a case of possible overconfidence here after game 2? You got a stranglehold. You got to name one of your next 3 games, and the way that Toronto team started games 3 and games 4.
Yeah.
This is their own team, and said it was ugly, and I just didn't expect that. Was there a little overconfidence, you think?
Yeah, I think so, and I think just gripping their sticks a little too tight. I mean, You want to close out the series, and you've been the top team all season long, and you do have that pressure on you, but at the same time, losing your star player, I mean, Minnesota came in and started playing hot again like they had been in the beginning of the season, so I definitely think it was just Toronto gripping their sticks too tight and couldn't close out.
I wanted to ask you about this because most of these women haven't played in a series before. It's just not what happens in major tournaments in women's hockey. It's usually one and done. In game 1, Toronto's up 3-0 with plenty of time left, and Minnesota head coach Ken Klee doesn't pull his goaltender. And I remember thinking it was weird. A couple other people had said, why didn't he pull his goaltender? And like I said, I was covering the series, so we asked him the next day, why didn't you pull your goaltender? And he said, it's kind of a confidence thing. Mm-hmm. I didn't want them to allow a few empty net goals, lose 4-0, 5-0. Suddenly, a close game becomes a rout. Yeah. I'll fully admit, I thought that was crazy thinking.
Yeah.
But then this is a team that had the confidence to come back and beat Toronto in the series. So as a former player, do you buy into that thought process of we don't want them to get routed because it might affect them the rest of the series?
Yeah, most definitely. I think Ken Klee knows his team best. He knows their personalities. And I mean, even from a goalie perspective, if you pull Hensley, I mean, how does that affect her confidence if she's going to play that next game? So I definitely think he made the right decision. He knows his team best, but at the same time, he had confidence in them, and he was able to show that by not pulling the goalie and giving them their grace and letting them have the time to settle in and win it in game 5.
And that's why head coach Ken Klee's coaching in the final, and we're talking about it. One more thing on this series before we go. Taylor Heise. A lot of people look at her season, and I don't want to use the word disappointment, but a number 1 pick comes with a lot of pressure, and we've seen flashes of brilliance. That game 5, there were quite a few times where I said, there's the number 1 pick we've been waiting for. Your thoughts on her series?
Well, I think anytime you're moving up into the professional level, I mean, we see it right now in the WNBA with Caitlin Clark. You have to find your footing, and there's going to be adversity, and I think Taylor Heise definitely faced that, but at the same time, it's playoff hockey now, and clearly she's back and ready to go.
Let's shift gears to Montreal and Boston. And I said this off the top. Was this the closest sweep you've ever seen? 60 minutes, not enough in any of the games. We saw a triple overtime game. Really, we could easily be sitting here talking about Montreal sweeping Boston. Yeah. But what a series this was. And Erin Frankel, I mean, what a show she put on.
Oh yeah, and I mean, Boston, they started to struggle throughout the season and whatnot, but moving forward into playoffs, they faced that adversity earlier on in the season. They were able to implement that into their playoff game, and I think that's exactly how they're moving forward and playing. They were hot and ready to play Montreal, and I think that their roster is actually starting to show up now.
They're 9-1 since the international break. I mean, you talk about getting hot at the right time, and Boston was one of those teams that was surprising a lot of people, the very fact that they had to fight for that playoff spot, but momentum is everything heading into the playoffs.
Oh yeah, and I mean, they have all the momentum going into playoffs. So you said 9-1, and I mean, to beat Montreal, to face Poulin. I mean, Knight versus Poulin. But again, these players know how to show up in these big moments, like Knight, like Mueller, Hannah Brandt. So, I mean, there's so many girls that have been playing well for Boston, and I think that their roster is starting to click. And again, Frankel just outstanding.
Playoff MVP early? I know it's not that early. We're in the final, but if you're making a pick right now, I mean, the first 2 games, she got into Montreal's head. You make over 100 saves in 2 games, you start thinking we can never score.
Yes, and that's insane. That's got to be frustrating for Minnesota. But at the same time, I think it's going to be a great series moving forward. And I mean, both goalies are hot, Rooney and Frankel right now. So I think it's battle of the goalies from what I see.
So PWHL final, the battle for the Walter Cup, and Boston takes that early lead in game number 1. Your thoughts on, are we going to see Minnesota do what Minnesota did against Toronto? Are they going to be able to bounce back? Your thoughts on the final?
Well, I thought that game was so back and forth. It was one of the most exciting playoff games that I've watched so far, and I think Minnesota was in it just as much as Boston was. And I mean, obviously Boston coming out with the win, but I mean, both goalies standing on their head. Taylor Heise showing up again, Kayla Cava. I mean, Jess Healy getting that goal. So there's so many girls who are contributing, and I think that that's the most important piece, is that it's been back and forth, and that's playoff hockey.
Yeah, it is. And you know, it's easy to say people like goals because people do like goals.
Yes.
But you're right about that type of game for the fan base is something you want to see. We saw 2 very tight, low-scoring games. Yes. I mean, I was at the game, Toronto, Minnesota, double overtime, 0-0. This is the type of series I think a lot of people want to see.
And as much as you want to see beautiful goals and whatnot, I'd love to see a beautiful save as well. I mean, there's nothing like a goalie coming across her crease and windmilling that glove or whatnot. So I think we're in for some amazing goals, but the goaltending has been phenomenal.
I'm not going to make you have a prediction because, like you said,
don't do it.
No,
don't do it.
We're just terrible, but we're going to be with you all along the way throughout this finals. They battle for the Walter Cup. This has been Hockey North. Thanks for watching.